In this Sikha, the Rebbe is going to be speaking about the fact that the Alter Rebbe put in Sfiras HaOmer all the way at the end of the Siddur, also contrasting with the way it is in Siddur HaArizal. And the Rebbe is going to show many similarities between Sfiras HaOmer and davening, and how Sfiras HaOmer in a certain sense is really highlighting the whole point of what davening is all about. So the Rebbe starts off the Sikha by saying that Sfiras HaOmer is interesting. On the one hand, it's all about a preparation for Shavuos and Matan Torah. The Chinuch says that when you're counting for something, it's showing how excited and enthusiastic you are looking forward to whatever it is. On the other hand, it still becomes a complete mitzvah for itself, that you make a bracha on it, and so on and so forth. Says the Rebbe, based on this, we're going to understand what we just mentioned before, that the Alter Rebbe puts the Sfiras HaOmer all the way at the end of the Siddur. So first of all, we're going to want to understand why the Alter Rebbe put it all the way at the end. Second of all, we want to understand, when we compare it to the Siddur HaArizal, on which the Alter Rebbe's Nusach is based, there the Arizal actually finishes off with the Kavonos of Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. So we know generally the Alter Rebbe did everything in a very, very precise way, in a very orderly fashion. So the question is, why did the Alter Rebbe do this? Now, simply we could say that the Siddur HaArizal is for Yechidei Zgula, for select individuals. The whole idea that Alter Rebbe came to make a Siddur that's more equally shayach to everybody else. The Alter Rebbe is going in a very, very simple order. He first puts all the things that come very frequently, those things that are very common. And later on in the Siddur, he puts the things that only happen much more rare, or only once a year. Those things are all the way at the end of the Siddur. Within that itself, he's going according to the calendar, according to the year. So we have Chanukah, Purim, Pesach, and ultimately Sfiras HaOmer at the end. However, says the Rebbe, since we know that the Alter Rebbe wrote the Siddur in a way that it should be in accordance to the Poskim and Halacha, as well as to be in accordance with the Inyanim of Kabbalah and Pnimiyus HaTorah, it's understood that this order that the Alter Rebbe did surely is also going to be fitting with both the Nigla and the Pnimiyus aspects of what it's all about. Says the Rebbe, based on this we could say that really the reason the Alter Rebbe put Sfiras HaOmer at the end of the Siddur is because Sfiras HaOmer in a certain sense emphasizes, brings out the most important things about what davening is all about, both in regards to the davening itself, as well as to the person davening, and this is why it's put all the way at the end as sort of the ultimate goal or the purpose, or the ending, highlighting what's the davening is all about. The Rebbe is actually going to look at 4 different aspects in davening and seeing this same idea highlighted specifically in the area of Sfiras HaOmer. So the first thing the Rebbe says is that generally in mitzvahs we know that we have mitzvahs that are more about the action, the ma'aseh b'poel. You have tzitzis, you have tefillin. There's also the mitzvahs that you need to do by speech, whether it's you remembering Yetzias Mitzrayim or whatever it is. Although, of course, in these mitzvahs you also have to have kavanah, but the main idea is either doing the action or saying the words and so on. Then we have mitzvahs that are more about the feeling of the heart, avas Hashem, yiras Hashem, etc. Now, davening is very, very unique. On the one hand, we do need to verbalize the words. But what's the point of davening? The whole idea of davening is more about a feeling of the heart, that we're davening, we're begging Hashem for what we need. So very different to other mitzvahs where we say that, yeah, the mitzvah has to have kavanah, but practically, if you did the mitzvah without kavanah, we say you did the mitzvah, it's just you didn't have the kavanah, so maybe you weren't yoitza in some cases even, but you did something. But in davening, we're saying something very, very different. In davening, we're saying the whole point of davening is the kavanah. Now, of course, you have to say the words, but without the kavanah, the words that you said were just not considered davening. The Rebbe says this idea, that the whole idea of davening is that knowledge, although you're going to have to say the words, the kavanah, even though you're going to have to say the words, this we see clearly in Sfiras HaOmer. The Alter Rebbe paskins that one needs to say, you could count Omer in any language, but you need to understand what you're counting. The Alter Rebbe says if you didn't understand what you're saying, it's just not considered counting at all. Counting means you understand what you're saying, you understand what you're counting. In other words, the mitzvah is the idea or the kavanah of the person. Without that, there is no counting. And it's exactly the same thing, like we said, what davening is all about. The Rebbe now looks at the second point. The Rebbe says, since we just said the idea of davening happens as a result of the kavanah of the person, so it's understood that the first change that happens is within the person himself. Has to be a change as a result of his davening. And here too, we're going to see a certain common thing between tefillah and how it's emphasized by Sfiras Omer. So in tefillah, when the person is davening, there needs to be a change within the person himself. The person is standing by Shmoyna Esrei as a slave in front of his master. He needs to see himself like as if he's standing in front of the Shekhinah. It's in that way that he becomes a davener. He changed from the way he was before. He's now in a new state of mind. In other words, the person changed through his davening. He's changing himself. A similar way in Sfiras Omer. We say in Sfiras Omer, you told us, Hashem, to count. And what's the point? What are we trying to do? To purify ourselves from our klipos, from the tumah, that our nefashah should become pure, etc., etc. In other words, it's all about having an internal change inside the person as well. The Rebbe moves on to another common theme between tefillah and Sfiras Omer. In most mitzvahs, the main idea of the mitzvah is achieved once you've done your part. You did the mitzvah and now it's over, as far as you're concerned. In tefillah, we have something very interesting. On the one hand, the point of tefillah is that you're trying to get something. You're asking Hashem should fulfill your needs. In other words, that's what tefillah is all about, the result of the davening. But at the same time, fulfilling the mitzvah is not at all dependent of whether your request is going to be fulfilled or not. It's you did your part and now the mitzvah is done. Even though the whole goal is to get something, what Hashem is going to give you. Says the Rebbe, similarly by Sfiras Omer. On the one hand, as we mentioned right in the beginning, it's all about a hachana, preparation to Matan Torah. That's what the mitzvah is. But on the other hand, this preparation itself becomes a full mitzvah on its own, as we just explained by tefillah. In other words, this actual yearning, desire, preparing for Matan Torah becomes something for itself, which all emphasizes the idea of the avodah of the person. In other words, what's tefillah all about? And tefillah, in both cases, it's all about the avodah of the person. It's not only about what the results will later be. Says the Rebbe, now we can also understand the difference between the Siddur HaArizal and the Alter Rebbe Siddur. Siddur HaArizal is for people that are being mechavan all the Kabbalistic things, all the kavanos. In that, if that's the case, then tefillah is not only about the avodah of the person, but it's also those kavanos where you're thinking about what's going to be achieved through the tefillah, that you're going to be correcting this sphere and this world, and the worlds are going to be elevated, etc., etc., which in turn, of course, will then cause the ashpois and all the brachas into this world. In other words, according to Kabbalah, the results of the davening are still very much part of your davening and your kavanos. And that's why in the Arizal Siddur, it begins with the general idea of tikkun and aliyas oilam is fixing, elevating the worlds. Because that's what the davening is, a very important part about it is, again, what's the result happening? The ending of the Arizal Siddur is not with Sfiras Omer. We said Sfiras Omer is more about the avodah of the person. The ending of the avodah, the Siddur of the Arizal is with the Kedusha of the special days of Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Simchas Torah, the special Hamshachos that are being drawn down. Because again, it's not focused on just the davening, the avodah of the person himself, it's also on the results that are coming down as a result of it. But the Alter Rebbe Siddur, which as we said is Shava L'chol Nefesh, is for everyone. Here the emphasis is about the avodah of the person. And therefore, what does the Siddur start with? It starts with the importance of getting up for Tikkun Chatzos whenever we can. Through this, the Alter Rebbe says you become an Avdei Hashem, one of Hashem's servants. In other words, it's all about the avodah of the person. What does the Siddur finish off with? That the ultimate is the idea of Sfiras Omer. It's all about the achievement and the avodah of the person. And this is why the Alter Rebbe specifically puts the Sfiras Omer over here, different to the Arizal. Now, a person based on this may think that the avodah then of the Yid is just a count, and it doesn't actually have the power to affect all the Oilamos. So comes Sfiras Omer and says no. Specifically in Sfiras Omer, we see the importance of what our avodah can achieve more than anything else. Because different to Shabbos, which is just holy by itself, and other Yom Tovim that based in make holy, it's specifically Shavuos that is based on the individual sphera, counting of every individual. So we see the power that you still have as an individual and what you're doing. Says the Rebbe, this then, once again, is going to tie into the whole mile of a person in his davening. Because as we know, what's the chiddush of davening? What's the unique thing of davening? We say, Yehi Ratzon. We're saying, may it be the will of Hashem. That means even if up until now, this was not the plan, what was going to happen, we're asking Hashem, this person was sick, he should become cured. There isn't rain, rain should come down. In other words, similar to the idea of Sfiras Omer, which is about the tremendous power that a person has as a result of his avodah, so too in tefillah, on the one hand, the whole idea of tefillah is the person's avodah, but yet it has such a tremendous power to cause new things. And now the Rebbe finally goes to one more comparison between Tefillah and Sfiras Omer. The Rebbe says, based on what the Alter Rebbe himself explains in Likutei Torah, we'll understand the connection even furthermore. And that is, the Alter Rebbe explains how Tefillah is really the spinal cord that holds up all the other mitzvahs. This is the place where the greatest level of the Ein Sof, which is higher than all of Ishtalshalus, is coming down into Ishtalshalus to cure the sick and to be Mevorech Hashanim, etc. In a similar way is Sfiras Omer. Each individual says in the Ribono Shel Olam that as a result of our Sfiras Omer, Yushpa Shefa Rav B'chol Olamos. So much hashpah, so much abundant flow of energy should come down into all the Olamos. Similar to that general great level of Kedusha that comes down from Hashem during our davening. But furthermore, it should come down into the details. L'sakenes nafsheseinu, v'ruchiseinu, v'nishpeseinu, to correct our nefesh, etc. Similar to the individual hamshach that comes down to davening to cure the sick, etc., etc. The Rebbe concludes that by being involved in Sfiras Omer, we should be zoiche immediately to harachmon uyachzer lana avodas Beis Hamikdash, to have the Beis Hamikdash when we'll be able to fulfill the mitzvah of Sfiras Omer in the most perfect way immediately.